and welcome to Adventures with Scars. I'm your host, Lauren Huffmaster. Adventures with Scars is a discussion on the invisible side effects of cancer, the emotional side effects. Last season, I presented my philosophy on the aspects of cancer that are difficult to put into words. I defined what is invisible and presented a timeline of how we heal from the trauma of cancer. In our second season, I'm talking with other patients, survivors, and co-survivors. These discussions with survivors will help all of us better understand the experience of cancer. Also, we want to know whether or not these invisible side effects are real. Today, I'm talking with Louise Marvulli. Louise was diagnosed with thyroid cancer 11 years ago and melanoma 7 years ago. She's been living with stage 4 melanoma for 6 years now. Louise, thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
So can you tell us a little bit about your cancer journey?
So my cancer journey began about 11 years ago when I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer. I had a goiter for several years, which is like an enlarged gland in your or on the side of your thyroid. And then I went in, they removed it. At first they said there was nothing there, but then when pathology came back, they said, oh, it's cancer. And so I went in and had the radioactive iodine, which is a tablet you take and then you're isolated for about a week. And, that was very scary and all that, because anytime you hear the word cancer, it's like, what? But I got through that and everything's been great with that since. So then fast forward, and 2016, I had a mole on my shoulder. Now I am somebody that was raised in Southern California, went to the beaches all the time, fried like a lobster because I have fair skin. So I had moles, I had, freckles and stuff. But my mother's brother so my uncle had melanoma, stage 4, and I was aware of skin cancer because of that. So I remember looking in the mirror, and I had this mole forever on my shoulder. I remember it looking a little darker. And because my mother's an RN and I've been raised kind of, always being your own advocate. And, if you see something, say something. So I was a little hyper alert to that mole, and I thought, okay. And then it kind of itched a little bit, or maybe at night I scratched it or something. So it was really bothering me. And at the time, I think our copay was $60 to see a specialist. And of course, I threw a fit about that, but which is silly now. But, I just was like, So I went in and I went to a specialist in Walnut Creek who had helped my sons with their finger warts when they were teenagers. And that night, I've had other things frozen off, no big deal. But that particular night, I was extremely anxious. I mean, there was just something in my gut. And he was like, well, I can freeze it off. And everything told me no. So I said, no, we'll just leave it. We'll see what happens. About a week later, that gnaw in my stomach was like, get a second opinion, get a second opinion. And I was still freaking out. I have to pay another $60. But I went ahead and found Dr. Lee in Walnut Creek at the laser center. And I said, well, you know what? Better safe than sorry. So I went in there. And her theory or her motto is, when in doubt, cut it out. Don't freeze it. Just cut it off. So I was like, okay. So they cut it off. A couple days later, it comes back, stage 1 melanoma, which floored me because I was like, what? And because my uncle had just barely survived, maybe 20 years earlier, I was just like, it terrified me. So I went in and had the wide incision, which is where they cut your margins out. I always say it's like a baked potato. you put a little slice in there, but then you scoop all, you have a little tiny sliver, but then on the inside, they're scooping all around it. So had a, scar there, nothing too bad. And they came back, said the margins were all clear. And I said, okay. And my mother had said, you need to see an oncologist and you need to get a PET scan. So I had asked my doctor for that. And I found an oncologist in just a couple cities away, and went to her. And it was funny, when I first met her, she was just kind of like, oh, you don't need that, that's a can of worms, getting a PET scan, da 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 da. Not to mention the insurance, they have to usually battle the insurance to get it. But regardless, I told her I won't be able to rest until I have one. So she complied. The insurance approved, and I got one done. So the PET scan was clear, but she did see a couple nodules in my left lung. Now, you have to remember, I was born and raised in Southern California, so there's a lot of smog there. And she said it's probably just environmental, but we'll do another scan in 6 months, and then we'll know, because if it grows, then we'll know there's something going on. And if it doesn't, then it's just probably from, the air quality, life growing up, whatever. And I said, okay. So fast forward 6 months, got my scan done. My mother was in town for her birthday. Her and I went up to Calistoga and did those volcanic ash baths, and then had a mineral bath. We just whole spa day. And came back a few days later, and I had noticed under my armpit there was a lump, and it hurt. And I thought, maybe from all the toxins coming out, maybe one of them got swollen. But I do remember in that moment, it did connect that was right under where that mole had been. So I was like, okay. So fast forward a couple days, and I noticed that it went from like a walnut to like maybe a golf ball. And I thought, okay, this hurts. So I called, and they got me in with an ultrasound. And that was interesting, because I've had ultrasounds before. And after she did the ultrasound, she literally, and I'm not exaggerating, disappeared for like 40 minutes. And I remember thinking, did they go to lunch? Because I think my appointment was around noon. I thought, did they forget about me? What's happening? I never have had to sit there that long without anybody coming back. And then when she finally did come back, she brought the doctor, and it still really wasn't registering. They were like, I talked to your dermatologist, you need to see her immediately. And I was like, oh, okay. But it didn't really hit me weird or anything. I was just like, okay. So then I went home, told my husband, and then my dermatologist calls. And I was like, oh, hi. And she's like, listen, I need you to hear me. I need you to get to an oncologist. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, I have one. I can call her. And she's like, I need you to call her immediately. And now this is like a Friday at 3 p.m. So I'm like, okay. So I called her, and she has like a satellite. So she's normally in Pleasant Hill, but she has a satellite office in Dublin. So I called her and told her what they told me and what's happening. And she said, okay, I want you to come here right now. She said, I will get the radiologist to pull up and look at the scan again, because we just did your scan not even 30 days ago. Just come here. And I said, okay. So we drove there. And even then I didn't really know what the deal was. It never registered in my mind, like this could be bad. And so when I got there, she's like, I need you to sit down. And I was like, okay. And she said, it's metastasized to your arm. And I was like, oh. And she's like, so it's melanoma, it's cancer. We did see a very small, maybe a marble up under there when we looked back through the scans, but they were looking for my lung thing. So I guess they just didn't see it. So she was really upset because now at this time, it's like the size of a golf ball going into a lemon. So it was growing pretty rapid. And so she was on the computer immediately, asked me. So I guess Stanford are the top for melanoma, and so is UCSF. They both have a really top melanoma team. And so she asked me where I want to go, and I chose Stanford because in my mind, I'm like, okay, I won't have to deal with the whole traffic and everything in San Francisco. I didn't really know how far Stanford was. But so that was like the end of January. I got to Stanford. They were doing more biopsies by this time. So this is like probably a week later, she got me in to see this arm surgeon. By this time, it's already up coming across my chest, heading to the brain. So it was moving very quickly. My surgery was on Valentine's Day, 2017, which little did I know, I found out probably a year later that they had a cancellation that day, and they never have cancellations. So I knew that was the grace of God, because I think I was scheduled 2 weeks after that, and it surely would have been in my brain. So that was a total miracle that I got that appointment, got in there, removed it all. They took 77 lymph nodes from my torso on my right side. So now I have lymphedema, which, that was kind of another, oh, now this is forever. I have to live with this. There's no reversing it. I really didn't even know what it was. So luckily, I always say, thank God for the day and age that we're in, because they have, a machine that I have at home that can help me with that an hour a day. And that, can wear cute lympha sleeves, diva sleeves, I call them. And, you do have to wear compression bras, which the only disappointment with that was that the insurance will only pay for that if you have breast cancer. And I thought that was a little sad that it should be for anyone with any type of cancer, because as you know, probably those bras can be like $300. So it's just all these little things going, what? Okay, I got to adjust to this. I have to learn to live with this. And so as soon as they got done with that, they told me I was what's called BRAF positive, which means my BRAF gene was mutated, which is why it was growing like a wildfire. And that doesn't have to do with me or my genes or anything. That has to do with the actual cancer itself. So my melanoma was BRAF positive. So the doctor said, we're going to start you on Yervoy, which is an immunotherapy. And I believe at the time that was the one that was just coming out of trial. And he said, I'm going to hit you hard like an atomic bomb because it is so aggressive. And I said, okay. And I remember sitting there for my first infusion and the nurse checking the bag. And, you go in for your infusion, they have one nurse reading off your name and stuff, and the other one's verifying it and asking you. And she kind of walked away and came back, and she goes, no, I guess this is right. And I said, what's going on? She said, I have never seen nor given this much before. So I had to keep checking because it's I'm like shocked. And I said, oh, okay. That kind of freaked me out. But then I thought, I think I was just like, let's get this drug, let's get it over with. And so I had about 3 infusions, I believe. And then I was hit with severe colitis. And I was probably in and out of the hospital for about 3 months. I'd go in, they'd kind of get it under control. I'd go home, maybe a day or two, and then I'd be right back in the hospital. So I was very, very, very sick. And I remember thanking God so much for Jello because I was so hungry, and they had all kinds of flavors. I also remember watching Chopped and keeping a detailed diary of all the food I was going to eat when I could again. And the top of my list was a wedge salad with bacon and blue cheese and all these things. And my doctor would say, "Why do you torture yourself?" And I said, "No, doctor, this isn't torture. This is me having something to look forward to." And that's what got me through those moments of Jello. And when I was able to graduate to mashed potatoes, God, those were so good. So what I took from that experience is I never, ever will take a bite of food for granted again. And I do not waste time eating anything I don't want to eat. So I appreciate that. But it got to the point where they had to give me a chemotherapy called Remicade to counteract the colitis because nothing was working. And thank God that did work. And so once I got through that, I was able to go through my diary and start eating things again, which was great. And for anyone that suffers with any type of colitis and stuff, having iceberg lettuce is definitely not on the list. But I got to the
Yeah. Okay, let's stop because you got cut off. Are you back on?
Yeah, I'm back on it.
Okay,
The
cool.
phone rang. Sorry.
Oh, okay. That's okay. All right. Well, while we're paused, can I ask you, so I hear at the very beginning, you started out with saying you're a good advocate for yourself. And then as you were diagnosed and these decisions were made, you said over and over that you didn't even register what was happening and you didn't know what was going on.
Right.
And you didn't know, like, even when they were saying like lymphedema, or you took out all of these lymph nodes, amazing amount of lymph nodes, you didn't know yet what the repercussions of that decision would
Right.
be.
I didn't even know
Medical
what it
decision.
meant.
Yeah.
Right.
So this is like a real thing, right? We're making quick decisions. The doctors are making quick decisions, and
Yeah.
we are asked if we agree, and we sign off that we agree, but we don't even know what we're agreeing to sometimes.
We don't even have a clue. We're almost numb. We're almost just in the state of going through the motions and trusting, obviously, what they're telling you, because I don't know. And then when it's final, like, okay, we have removed all this and those aren't coming back, and you will live with this for the rest of your life. That's a whole nother mental game, which even happened with the thyroid because now I'm dependent on medication. And I remember asking my doctor, "Well, what if there's a catastrophe and I can't get my medication?" And he said, he was a jokester. He said, "Well, the diet, just know the diabetics will die first." I'm like, I don't even think that's funny, but I had to come mentally, I had to come to terms with that. I have to rely on pharmaceuticals to survive. And that was a big challenge because then all of a sudden you don't feel free, right? You don't feel like you can just take off and go. And no, you're reliant on something that if you don't take it, you will not live. It won't be as drastic as type 1 immediately, but you have to have thyroid. So there's a lot of coming to terms with what that looked like. It wasn't just going to be take a pill and you'll be fine.
Yeah, and there's a lot
So
of grief that goes along with that. Just the grief of your loss of freedom, and the grief of that something's been taken out of you or damaged in a way that's not functioning anymore, and that you are changing in the process.
the grief, also you feel paralyzed, but as it starts to settle in, no one prepares you for that. You don't even know who to talk to about that. And I have an amazing husband who's so supportive, but like many men, God designed them to fix and conquer and take care of you. And he's hurting too because he doesn't know how to fix that part. He's like, he can hold me and love me, and he did, and it was wonderful. But I felt so isolated in my own head. I felt so alone, and that is not a comfortable feeling, because then you start to doubt: am I nuts? Am I crazy? Am I a hypochondriac? I don't know. Just all these things start to make you question your own self. Do I have enough faith? Even as silly as, what did I ever do wrong in my life? Like, what am I being punished for? And so there's like this whole period of just trying to cope with everything that's happening in your mind. And so once the chemo they put me on cured the colitis, then they had to move towards a different drug, and I was put on a targeted drug, Tafinlar and Mecanix, and I'm only able to take all these treatments because I am BRAF positive. Those that are not BRAF positive do not have the option of immunotherapy and the treatments that I am fortunate enough to take, although it's kind of a double-edged sword, because those that don't have the BRAF gene can first say, like my uncle, he's been 24 years clean, not a reoccurrence, nothing, but with the BRAF positive, I've already had like 4. So it's, and the doctor's like, it's not a matter of if it'll come back, it's a matter of when it'll come back. Yeah, that's some hard stuff to hear. It's like, no, I'm just going to see myself cured. So long story short, the way melanoma kind of works is, I'll say like, well, how do I know if the medicine's not working? Well, you'll know because it'll just show up again. And I took that targeted drugs. They were just pills in the refrigerator for about 1.5 years. And I remember feeling like a lump over on that shoulder area where I had my surgery. And sure enough, there was a spot that came back. So I was like, okay. So they decided to do radiation, which God bless everybody has to go through radiation. For me, radiation was really difficult. Not because, I didn't feel it when it was happening, but because of the region and where they did it, which is my upper torso, it really, really fried my esophagus and stuff. And so it was very painful after. So that was a challenge. And I remember the doctor saying, oh, it's only going to last like 17 days and you'll be able to swallow again. Because, they were giving you like lidocaine and just things that kind of numb it. And I remember getting up to that 17 days. I'm like, she's crazy. Like, this is never going to change. I'm miserable. And then sure enough, on the 17th day, so bizarre, all of a sudden it started to heal, and that spot went away. So I was like, okay, so I'm on the Tafinlar and the Mecanix, and that was about 1.5 years. And all of a sudden I started to see rainbow auras in my visual. I perceive it in my left eye, but it's in both my eyes. It's just the way my brain perceives it. And I remember thinking, well, those are weird. Kind of like flashing metallic light, but then a big rainbow, bright and flashing and stuff. And then after I would have that, maybe it lasted 10 or 20 seconds, then I would get a really, really bad migraine. And that was a challenge. And it was always right where my right over my right eye. And it was right where my eyebrow bone was, which was so strange. I'm like, why am I getting a headache right where my eyebrow bone is? But I would get this migraine that would last sometimes hours. sometimes I would just have to go into a dark room, and I just didn't know why. So it turns out, and I had gone to the eye doctor, and I had gone to the one that looks behind your, your eye, make sure nothing's there, and all the specialists, and they were like, no, everything looks good. Maybe it's just uveitis because, you're on medication that has so many side effects. So, and it can affect your visual. So I was like, okay. So fast forward, I am having my birthday party. It was my 50th birthday party. And I kept having these daily, and I was on, I think at this point, they're giving me some pain meds for my migraines. And I remember waking up the day after my birthday, and I could not walk, like my equilibrium, like I was completely disorientated. So at this point, we were in Southern California. As you know, we live in Brentwood. So my mom worked at Pomona Valley. So my husband drove me there, got an MRI, and sure enough, there was a melanoma tumor on my ocular nerve in the back of my head, which is why I perceived it in my left eye. So I was like, oh, wow. Okay, I guess that means the medicine stopped working. So we drove home. Actually, it was challenging because our youngest son is autistic, and we had the whole family there. And I had to entrust my older kids, which they're adults, but like in their 20s, but they've never driven up the 5. They've never done that long drive. And I literally had to surrender and entrust all my kids to a car together, and that they were going to drive home safely while I was in the hospital. And I don't know if anybody can relate to that, but talk about releasing power and just not being fearful that something's going to happen to them on their way home, or that I won't be there. My son's never driven that long before. And so I had all that in my mind while I'm laying in the hospital trying to understand what's happening. And so that was a challenge, but it was also freedom as well, because I was able to release that. I got home safely, and it was like, okay. Then my husband and I drove back together once they released me, and then proceeded to get a brain surgery. Luckily, it was not very big, and it kind of just came out, nothing too webby or anything. That's what those ocular seizures were. So the tumor was pressing on my nerve, and so they call them ocular seizures. So as they happen, it kind of looks like everything. I guess it would kind of look like a seizure in a body, but it's just happening in your visual. So I learned all about that, and I still have them if I get extremely tired, or sometimes when like you're in, like right now we're at summertime, so everything's cave mode in the house, but then you go outside and the sun's really bright. Sometimes I that can trigger one, but that's pretty much, I would say, the only effect I have from that. I had the gamma knife, which is targeted radiation. Thank God for that. That in itself is a miracle, because when you get all over radiation in the brain, it's so many more side effects, can lead to dementia and all kinds of things. So it was a blessing that the Bay Area developed this gamma knife here in Walnut Creek, and I was able to get that, and everything was good. But with radiation, you can get necrosis, which is the inflammation. So when I talk to you about steroids, when you have bleeds or anything to do with bleeding, in the brain, they'll give you a steroid called Decatron, and that's about 40 times stronger than prednisone. And that is for inflammation as well, but it's also for bleeding. So, boy, was that a challenge.
So what does it feel like to be on a super strong steroid?
It feels like you want to crawl out of your skin. You are going, and it's not just your mind, but every part of you feels like you're going 1,000 miles an hour, but yet you're like a zombie because you're so tired because you can't sleep very well. And then you have a very strong impulsiveness, whether it's cleaning out your closet or eating very, very impulsive eating. And a lot of times it's geared towards, for me, it's anything with a strong, salty, vinegar, spicy, because your taste buds are also affected. So it can be a challenge to control your eating. And that's why you can put on weight during steroids, because you just can't satisfy it. Nothing feels satisfying. Everything feels like all or nothing. Your physical body is recovering, but your mind wants to go and do everything right now. It doesn't want to wait. It's like, I got things to do, people to see, places to go. And that's how you feel all the time. But your body is like, no, because you're tired, you're fatigued. And so it's almost like a war going on between this mentalness of all or nothing, impulsiveness. You feel moody. You feel like you can lash out at people. You feel like you can save the world, rid the world of all the villains, become a vigilante. Like, it really puts you on a different level. You can listen to, screamo music, and it just fuels you because you're just the heavy drumming and stuff. Like, you feel that way all the time. So it's a lot of breathing, a lot of praying, a lot of sometimes I'll do like crosswords or something just to try to keep my mind, try to calm down. And I don't know, but I would assume this might be what it feels like to have something like ADHD or my son's autism, because it's just on all the time. And it can be a big challenge to focus, to not get moody, to like, a lot of times I want to go to sleep. Like, I just want to escape. And unfortunately, on steroids, a lot of times you can't sleep, but you do have these moments where I think your body catches up and you're so tired that you almost feel drugged, or you can't even keep your eyes open. And then when I am able to get that sleep, it usually lasts about 2 hours. I don't even hear anything. My husband can't even like wake me up. I am out. And it's because I'm so tired. So it's, this isn't my first time on steroids. I'm currently on a high steroid of prednisone. It's not Decatron, thank God. Although I was grateful for it because, it got me through my brain surgeries. Let me step back a second. So after the brain surgery, I went on Keytruda, miracle drug for me. Yes, side effects, fatigue, muscle aches, itchy, a lot of things, but tolerable compared to what I had already been through. And so it was working for me. And I had 2.5 years, every 3 weeks, I had an infusion. And then in October, I got really sick. I thought it was just a cold, the whole chest thing. I've had those before. even while on immunotherapy. But it turned out to be organized pneumonia. And what that is sometimes in immunotherapy, your body attacks itself. And that's one of the things that can happen. And so it's the inflammation of your lungs. And so I developed that. And the way to take care of that is steroids. And they put me on 60 milligrams of prednisone, which is very high. And although not as crazy as Decatron, it was a big challenge. And I think part of this challenge was, with my brain tumor, my body was physically fine. I just had this thing in my head they had to take out. This was different. I could barely breathe. I had no energy. I was completely wiped out. I think I lost 30 pounds in like a week. Like I was very sick. And that was the difference. I just could not do anything. So I went into the hospital. There was about a week period where they were trying to figure out what was wrong because they could see in my lungs, they could see a big growth, they could see a big mass. It was spreading. They were fearful that it was melanoma. I don't know. I always knew it wasn't for some reason. So they kept doing biopsies. I think they did a total of like 3 or 4 biopsies. And finally I said, listen, there's a team of you. Okay. Everything's pointing to organized pneumonia. Nothing's grown in the lab. So it's not fungal, bacterial, viral. You already know that. So we need to move towards steroids because I was just getting worse. So they agreed because I said, no more poking me in the lung, please. I'm done. So they started me on the high steroids and the ship started to right itself. The problem is steroids take time. And the inflammation was so great. It was already in my left lung by then. So I had it in my right lung and my left lung. And it did. It took time. I was there 21 days. What's interesting is after everything I've been through, that was probably the first time. And maybe because my normal story, my journey has been, here's what's wrong with you. Here's what we're going to do. And because there was that period of time where they weren't sure, I don't know. I started to feel like, oh my God, am I gonna make it? Like, what's wrong with me? I had lung specialists, I had oncology specialists, I had the melanoma specialist. So all these specialists, and nobody can give me an answer. That kind of sent me a little bit of a spiral of just, I don't know if I'm going to make it. And I never really had that feeling before. It was quite scary. I was there through Thanksgiving. I just started to go into this place of, I just want to go home. Will I ever go home again? I have 2 dogs that are like my therapy dogs, my everything, and of course my family. And just got to a point where I just wanted to go home. I didn't care about the Christmas tree or the presents. I just wanted to be home with my family. And that was a very interesting journey because I really, it sounds crazy, even through my brain surgeries and everything, just didn't have that feeling. And I think that is because they said, here's this and this, what we're going to do. And da, 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 da. I kind of had a schedule, if you will, like I knew what was coming, although we never, I guess, really know what's coming, but you know what I mean? They kind of laid it out for me and I kind of was like, okay, get through this hurdle and then the next. And there really wasn't anything laid out. So it was kind of like the abyss. It was like, what's going to happen? It was like, it was different. And so I was able to come home finally, very weak. During that time, what was interesting is my body our bodies are truly fascinating. But when you go through something like that, your hair falls out, your nails are very weakened, the muscle loss. It's like your body starts to just conserve for its organs. And it just, my skin, it would just shed off. It was just weird. And so I had a long way to go I couldn't even walk up a flight of steps. I was just so weak and I never experienced that before. So there was a mental process that went with that of wow, gosh, am I going to get better? There was comfort knowing I had the steroids because I knew steroids would help. I knew what I was going to have to deal with steroids, but it was kind of one of those moments where I was just so grateful to have steroids that I was just going to deal with it. So about March is when I was able to come off of the steroids. And that was 60 milligrams. And then about a month later, I had my PET scan and they said, oh, there's 2 new spots on your lung. And I was really surprised because I hadn't felt sick. My breathing was fine. My chest didn't hurt or anything. And I was like, what? And my husband and I were 2 weeks away from traveling to Ireland. And so that was kind of a mental blow. Because again, like I said earlier, I want to do everything now. Is this as good as it gets? I'm feeling lit because I'm on steroids. So let's go, 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 go. And in that moment, it was like, no, you can't go. You don't want to end up in the hospital. And then what kind of trip would that be? And, what's interesting to me is the journey of faith that I've always been a Christian, but boy, when you go through cancer, it's like the onion is peeled way back and you're exposed and you learn a lot about yourself, and God. And so at that time I had seen your post on your adventure therapy, and it just so happened you guys were doing a retreat, and we were able and blessed to go during the time we were going to be in Ireland. And one of the things we laugh about is we had stayed the night before in Mendocino before the retreat started, and we really don't know anything about the downtown, so we had went to eat, and it was an Irish pub. And we're over there laughing and going, okay, God, we see you. Like, what are the chances, right? The whole thing says Ireland and everything. And I think what God taught us was a couple things. We need to take time to connect. And what you offered was a beautiful place where there was no Wi-Fi. And at first that was odd, but we were raised that way. So it's just kind of have to get back to, oh, okay, no TV, no internet. But once we got through that, it was like, oh my God, this is magical. My husband and I think because our house is full, we have a special needs child. We aren't empty nesters. We are just, life is buzzing around us and we're just doing what we got to do. And sometimes we forget to just unplug. And I think it was such a blessing because even if we had gone to Ireland with our friends and our group, it's itinerary and running around and, you know what I mean? Go to this castle, go to there, go to that party at night, whatever. And you're not really connecting. You're going to need a vacation when you get home. So what God brought us was so much greater, and to be still and to remember, connect. And that's what we took away from that, not only meeting new people and connecting, but just, okay, you know what? Don't just plan this big grand trip for once a year. make sure you go out and get an ice cream cone weekly. Sit in the car, listen to music, talk about it. Because I think also in cancer, we're all just kind of surviving. And I don't want to upset my family, right? When I'm in my dark moments or I'm scared, I have a hard time wanting to even express that to my husband because I know he's in that same spot, right? He's in that fear. He's in that, oh my God, what's going on? Or, and then the kids are affected. And so I feel like cancer can isolate us that way as well, where we are still trying to make sure our family's okay, but we're suffering. And so I would encourage anybody to I go to a personal therapist, and I'm telling you, I go in there and it is so necessary for me because I don't feel like I can share everything with my family because I'm conscious of how it might make them feel. Or if I say, I'm tired. I'm tired of this anticipatory anxiety every time a scan comes up. I'm tired of feeling like, what's next? Is this as good as it gets? Like when I'm in those head spaces, I can't say that to my husband or my kids or my mom or anyone because then they are affected by that. So it's nice to have a safe place to just let all that out. And trust me, there's times I'm like, I'm done. I'm out. Just take me now, God. I can't take it anymore. The anticipation is just so anxiety producing. And then my therapist is just like, hey, that's okay. It's okay. And she's detached from it in a way that she can be there for me. And I don't have to feel any fear of saying any of that. I can just let it go, say it and let it go. Whereas if I try to say that to any of my loved ones, as you know, there's a fear there because you don't want them to be scared. And so, yeah, there's a lot that goes into the whole, having it, the thought of it, what's next? Will it come back? Will it not come back? Is this as good as it gets? And that's all spinning all the time, especially when you're on steroids. Um, and then the times where you lash out or you're moody, that makes it even worse because then you feel bad because it's not their fault. So it's like I say to myself all the time, day by day, moment by moment. Honestly, I don't even watch the news. I cannot be affected by what I cannot control. And I can't even control what's going on in my own life. So I just try to get outside. I try to ground myself. I try to stay in peace. I do like watching a movie, throwing on something where I can distract myself because I notice if I'm in my own head, it doesn't usually end well
So
because
how
then
how has all this impacted your family?
a lot. I think I'm seeing it now, and it kind of sounds weird because it's been, you know, 6 years. Is it 6 years? Yeah. Um, again, I think we do what we have to do when we have to do it. And now that it's been 6 years, I'm starting to see, oh, like I just started my son Michael, with the one with autism, in his own personal therapist because I'm starting to realize if I have an appointment or anything comes up, he instantly is like, "Mommy, is your cancer back?" Or he worries and worries and worries. And I guess going through it, it's like a given, like, okay, everybody's stressed, everyone's worried, everyone's trying to help everyone through it. But now that I'm starting to wake up and see, oh, okay, he needs an outlet as well. And maybe I'm learning that because of my own outlet. And so I'm trying to offer that to my adult children now. Like, if you need to go talk to somebody where it's It's just your own time. You can share all your fears and worries, and it's safe. Then please tell me, because I know what it does for me. So I can imagine what it does for them, being that I'm mom, you know, and
It
for
is
my husband.
interesting how yeah, it is interesting how we realize that we're all a little stressed, we're all a little overwhelmed because things are always changing and we can't know for sure what's going to happen. And with cancer, that becomes just a normal state of being. And though we realize that might be happening in our family, we forget to realize that it's going to compound over time. And for the
Right.
years that we're going through all of the treatments, you listed 7 years worth of treatments, and all the different things from surgeries to radiation to chemos and steroids, all of these things are happening. And every single time your family is shifting, you're shifting, and it's compounding. There's no, like you said, release. There's no place for it to blow off and clear up and then move on with sort of a new perspective. It just keeps building. And so in our family life, it becomes part of the culture of our life, just this level of stress, this level of anxiety, even if we're not intentionally addressing it, making time to talk about it, making it time for the family to process together, to give each other permission to process together. Or as you've mentioned, finding a cancer coach or a therapist outside of the family for each of them to talk to, so then they could come back together a little more relaxed and whole. So it is interesting as we consider cancer's impact on the family to think about this impact of the weight and the stress of the ongoing treatments and diagnosis that happen over and over and over.
Right. Right. And as I'm trying to make sure they're all okay, I think they're trying to make sure I'm okay by how they act, how they talk, how they speak. And so I think we're all kind of in the same space, and we're emotionally eating, or you know what I mean? We're coping in different ways, but I'm realizing, yeah, I need to start to apply the tools not only for myself, but for them, because they need it as well. And then take those times, we've gone out back and did s'mores with our fire pit, and just kind kind of be available to talk. Or I've learned to be really candid with them. I think in the beginning you just want to hide everything for them. I think about it now, and I think my husband has also thought about it. Like, my initial surgery was like 10 hours long or something, 9 hours long. And I remember thinking, oh my God, you sat there for that long by yourself? And we didn't even think about bringing the kids, because it's almost like, go to school, everything will be fine. But in hindsight, I thought, oh my gosh, like, I never even asked them, would that be okay? Do you want to be there? My husband was alone. He was able to talk to some family members that helped him through it. But it's just interesting how in hindsight, you're like, you're just trying to almost like make it an everyday. You're like, okay, go to school, everything fine. But then I think, gosh, maybe they were really scared, or maybe it would have been better if they had just been there with dad, or they could have got a hotel room and then went swimming, or I don't know. Like, but that never even crossed our mind, because we were just in mode. We were in go mode.
Yeah.
And so I'm
It's really hard to
trying.
know the balance here. It's hard to know the balance where, is this just another normal day for us, or is this going to be a big life changing? Like, it's hard
Right.
to know because you don't want to overstep into saying this is a really big deal and sort of set off alarms in people's heads, but you don't want to underplay it and sort of hide it either, because what if this is a big life-changing moment and you just never
Right.
mentioned it to anyone? So I think with cancer, especially, I've experienced this in the last few weeks, is how much do we talk about it? How much do we say? How much is is spoken in order to be open about our story, yet not so much we're talking about that it becomes overwhelming to people, like, because
Right.
everyone has a different level of curiosity and tolerance and capacity to really listen in and be a part of your story. But if you hide your story, then it's not doing anyone any good either. You're not allowing people the opportunity to be a part of your life. And so it's such a balance. It's hard to know, I think. And I've known from lots of friends that what seems to be a small procedure might be life-changing, might be life-ending even.
Right. Right.
And so it's hard to know. It's hard. You don't want to say like, this is happening to me and it's a big deal, because what if I personally go on and live another 20 years and I said that moment was a big deal, right? Because
Right.
I don't
Right.
know. I just don't know. There's
I think you don't.
uncertainty in every surgery. There's uncertainty every time you start a new treatment. There's uncertainty in every moment, because anything could happen. It could cure you or it could kill you. And we honestly just do not know what is coming next. And especially because, as you mentioned, your body gets tired, and what
Yeah.
might be regular procedure on an exhausted, exasperated body becomes this huge complication, huge problem. And so
Right.
cancer in your family life is hard. I talk to people and ask them to please be honest with their family, but then I hear you and I feel the same way right now. Like, what is honest? Like, how are we talking about this? And how much do we need to be being really, really clear about what's happening versus just making it say like, this is happening, I'm being honest, but it's just another day. It's just another,
Right. I don't
like, you
want you
guys
to
just
worry
live your
about it.
life
Right.
well, try not to worry. So it's such a complicated aspect to family. Families are already complicated. Marriage is already
Sure.
complicated. Raising kids is hard. And then you add this on top of it, and there is no very clear right or wrong, like how much is said, how much is implied. It is a difficult situation when you're parenting through cancer.
Well, and I think also you have to, something this has taught me, it's taught me many things, but one of them is to meet my kids where they are. Try not to put them all in one bracket, because for some families it does work maybe for them to keep that from them, knowing who their children are and knowing how it could really impact them. It might be the answer for them to kind of keep it from them in a way where they are not. My kids, as you know, are adopted, and they have gone through trauma in their own life. So for my husband and I, in raising them and loving them through their own stuff, we've always chose to meet them where they are, obviously talk in a language of where they're at, but to always be honest and to try to give them that place to say, you can say whatever you feel and it's okay. Um, and I still see it, because I had said something to my almost 30-year-old about, wow, this week's been rough. A lot of people have been re-diagnosed, and I have my brain MRI next week, and I'm feeling very anxious, because that's another thing steroids do. They put you on anxiety level 1,000. You're very vulnerable. It's like all your emotions are raw. You take things personally. You take things out of, like, all of a sudden you're just a mess. And so your anxiety's through the roof, and you already get scan anxiety, but now you have all these other people you love that they're now starting something new and this and that. And whew, I just kind of briefly mentioned it to her, and she started to go down the rabbit hole. I can't imagine life without you, Mom, and I just don't know what I'll do. And I had to stop and go, okay. I thank you for listening to me, but that, honey, I'm okay. I was just sharing how I was a little bit overwhelmed. And she's like, no, I know, and I'm sorry. And I said, no, I'm sorry. And I just had to realize that, oh, okay, that's when I call Lauren. That's when I call you. That's when I call a friend, because it just really reminded me, oh, okay, yeah, that's triggering for her. And so we hugged it out and everything. I just said, hey, it's just my scan. I'm good. And she calmed down, but I thought, okay, I have to remind myself they're coming from a different angle. I'm mom. It's a different whatever. And so it's helped me to stop, pause, and try to get to know them as individuals. Because now my son, who's 25, he never once came to the hospital. He called me. He has anxiety. He's more the one that just wants to bury his head and pretend it doesn't happen. And so I keep, he'll ask me I kind of almost just say, hey, do you have any questions for mommy? And then he'll kind of mention a few things, but I don't normally go to him with anything. I let him come to me. And then my youngest, he's Mr. Detective Police Officer, needs to know everything. So I have to kind of give him information, but kind of reel him back, like it's okay. And so I would say that has been a gift in this, to stop, get to know my kids individually, and be able to meet them where they are, because so many times as parents, we're going through our own stuff and it's just like, look, just do as I say, you know what I mean? And deal with it, because I can't even deal with it. But it's teaching me to help them deal with it more. It's to meet them where they are.
I think you bring up a really good point about the role of parent, right? I think when we are honest with our kids, when I talk about being honest, because I am 100% honesty is the best policy. We should not be lying to our kids or hiding. But what I mean, I think, is I don't ever suggest that we bear our burdens on our children. I think we should still stay in the role of parent, of course. And it's harder as kids get older to not see them maybe as a friend or a confidant, but I think no matter what age your child is, they are still your child. You're the parent in the situation, and giving our emotional burdens to them never works well. I think our burdens on our children are much heavier than if their friends or someone else gave them the same burdens, because as a parent, we are their strength. We provide them, whether it's real or not, we give them a sense of strength. And if our personal strength is failing, then putting our weakness on them, it doesn't work. It doesn't work very well for their future and their emotions. But it is important for us to tell them where we are and what we're dealing with, I think, more so than our emotional needs. And we should find help for those emotional needs somewhere else, right? We should call a friend or call a coach or a therapist, or listen to the podcast, or whatever it is that we need to do to help ourselves through the moments without putting our emotional burdens on our children.
No, I agree. I agree.
So
The
again,
podcast,
parenting is very, very difficult, right?
it's very difficult, and especially because every child's different. And some kids are maybe more, logical, literal, tell me everything. I can handle it. And other ones are like very emotional, and they immediately go to the dark side. And it's also allowed me to be more real with myself, because like my son, I just mentioned, that has anxiety. I share with him my anxiety. I share with him, yeah, I struggle with that too. And he'll say, you do? And I say, yeah, and life can be anxiety producing. And then I'll just say, well, but here's how I handle it. And if you ever just want to talk, or if you ever just need time with me, even if we're just go get an ice cream and are silent, like, if you ever just need me, just let me know, because my idea of what he might need from me may be different. And so getting to know them as adults, like you said, can make a falsehood of, oh, okay, they're adults, they can handle it. But I'm learning, no, not to treat them like maybe a baby or a child, but just, I've just learned through this to try to meet people where they are. And it's the same for even my husband. And I know that feeling you're talking about, because let me tell you, when he's down, I lose my mind. I'm the one that's used to having the problems. Wait a minute, you're my rock. You can't be down. and so I guess that gives a little glimpse of maybe what the kids feel. But yeah, I think just, it helps you not only find yourself, but it helps you also maybe get closer to them in a way that you never have before. I think life is daily, life is fast, life is overwhelming, and sometimes we don't even stop to get to know ourselves, much less our kids.
Definitely. So
Yeah.
through all the things you've gone through in the last 7 years, what, if you look back on that, what was your dominant emotion you're experiencing during this time?
Well, besides out of control fear, um, I don't, I never really thought of myself as a controlling person, but I think as a mother, we have a control of a lot of things, our house, the rules, whatever. A stay-at-home mom. And when this all happened and I had to really surrender everything, that I remember crying and being so angry at God because now I have to rely on my teenagers to clean my house. That pissed me off. And it sounds so petty, but I literally couldn't do a thing. And as I went through that emotions, at the other end of it, I realized, oh my gosh, this is freedom. Like, why haven't I done this 20 years ago? Woohoo! And so I would say a lot of anticipatory fear of the unknown is probably the dominant. Surrender, learning how and what that meant was very scary for me. I'd say just the unknown. None of us know, and I get that. That's part of being human. But as you know, when you have a scan every 3 months or you have infusions every week, it's just in your face, And when you've been blindsided 4 times of reoccurrences and different meds and this and that, it's almost like PTSD in a way, and you're just you're in the state. I feel like it's humming underneath of what's next, what's coming, and almost like non-peace. And I'm having to try to learn to let that go. And that's really hard because there's part of me that wants to be prepared. And I don't know if that's just a human thing. Do you know what I mean? It's like, oh, if I sit there and go, oh, I'm healed, everything's great, and it comes back, I feel like I'll be more devastated than if I'm just like, you know what? Okay, God, whatever your will is. But I have to hang on to a little bit of expectation that, okay, if it does, we'll do what we have to do. And I mean, I miss of course, nobody knows this unless you go through it, but yeah, you miss the days where you never even had to think about it, right? That never crossed my mind. I don't even know what that's like anymore. But in my day-to-day life, I will say this. Do I wish this never happened to me? Of course, nobody wants to go through this. Would I trade all the blessings and the lessons that I've learned? No way. Nope, I wouldn't trade them because through this, I've been more alive than I think I've ever been in my life. I've been more present. When they say, oh, give it to God, what does that mean? Live in the moment. What does that mean? Well, through cancer, you learn what that means. And it's a gift because we all know, okay, tomorrow's not promised, but when you're in the thick of it and it's in your face, God does teach you, like, okay, if you're doing crafts with your kids or you're out to lunch with a friend, be present, turn off the phone, enjoy it. Because if you don't, you're missing out. And I had to learn to stop waiting for the next shoe to drop and just be now. just be right here, be right now. And there are days that is harder than others, but there's a peace and a freedom that comes with that, and a spiritual, faithful awakening that I have never had in my whole existence. I was raised Catholic. I was raised very fear-based. I remember being a rebellious teenager, just feeling like, well, I'm never going to be good enough, so what's the point? And through this journey, oh, when people say God's a relationship, oh man, is he ever? And is he amazing? And so I learned that when people, I learned he's not a religion. I learned he is my personal God, and through, there's times I have like the worst day and all of a sudden there's this bird chirping at me, and you're like, what do you want? And it's like, or you see a heart or you see a rainbow, and I've learned to cherish all of those moments and see them as signs and see them as messages that I'm here, you're not alone. And as you know, recently I'm trying to reach out more and just say, you know what, I need friends, I need girlfriends, I need time outside of my own head and my own existence. And I think I went through a period of time where I didn't feel like I could commit to anything. So it made me feel isolated. I didn't want to let anyone down. Like I said, in my mind, I'm ready to go to bingo tonight. Let's go do this. And like, I have 50,000 things I'm like ready for, but my body's like, you ain't doing nothing. So I kind of pulled away thinking, well, they can't count on me, or, and I started to kind of go down that, what's my purpose, this type of stuff. And then, God just reminds me, hey, it's okay. Have a day off. It's all right. Be easy on yourself. Give yourself some grace. And I think I don't know if it's just a human thing, if it's a mother thing, if whatever. We're really hard on ourselves, and we don't give ourselves enough grace. And all the grace and love I would give to a friend, it's like, why can't I give a little bit of that of myself? Why am I so hard on myself? Because there'd be days I just would lay in bed and go, what's the point? What's my purpose anymore? And of course, my husband's head would spin off like, what are you talking about? But when you're used to running and taking care of the house and taking care of the kids and managing everything, and then all of a sudden it all comes to a stop, it's fascinating how we put so much worth in those things. And yet our loved ones are like, you being here is worth it. So it's like God takes you through this little journey of even discovering your own worth and your own love, and to self-love, and to reach out to a friend. Hey, let's get coffee. Or like, it doesn't have to look anyway. You want to come in your PJs, come in your PJs. Let's just get together. And so this last month or so, I've been just trying to reach out and give myself that grace, give myself that time to be like, hey, you know what? The best thing you can do is just connect with one another, because I know I need it, and I'm sure they need it too. When I got diagnosed, a lot of friends fell off. I don't, some were there that I didn't expect to be there, and ones I've expected to be there weren't there. And I know people go through that, maybe they've had a really bad experience with someone they've lost, or they don't know what to say or do. But for the person going through it, it feels very strange, because you're like, well, I'm still the same person. I'm still here. And so I know that I said a lot right there, maybe squirreled a little bit, but I
I
would
think it
say
was good because what you're describing is the idea of broken identity, right? The person you thought
yeah,
you were, the person who ran the house and ran the errands and was always busy and kept things up, you can't be that person anymore. You can't
right,
carry those responsibilities. You can't do the things that you thought your identity was in. And what's beautiful is you discovered that even though you couldn't do all the things that you in your own mind thought was your identity was in you being present. And that's what your family values, and that's what your family loves, because their identity of you is just someone who's present, who loves them, who cares for them by being there. And so I think that is one of the most amazing parts of the cancer experience, is we can identify our worth, how we are valued, how we are loved, not for what we do, but for who we are. And as a mom, especially, it's easy to think we're only what we do. We feed, we drive, we clean, we ensure everybody looks spick and span and their faces are all wiped down before we walk into a building. But really, that's not the part of us that's valuable. It's just the part of us that fills up all of our days and time. And so surrendering, you use that word, surrendering what we believe is our identity and even our value, and then being open, holding our hands open to find out, what is our identity? What do people love about us? And why are we important? Why is it important that we are present in our kids' lives and our loved ones' lives? And learning, being open to learn what others see. That is a significantly difficult shift sometimes, but also a beautiful treasure once it's discovered. So actually, I asked you what emotions you feel, and you talked about all three of the things that I propose are
Okay.
universally experienced. You talked about isolation, you talked about fear, and you talked about this idea of the experience of broken identity. And these are the three things that I've identified are a typical emotional response to cancer. These are things we are all experiencing in our own way, in our own home, even if we're not talking about it. And so I love that you have put that into your own words. And then also, I love, my final question for our podcast are, what is a gift cancer's given you? And you talked about that as well, just the sense of self-worth, and your relationship with each of your children and how that's blossomed, because you've had the time to slow down and see and be present and hear them. But these are beautiful gifts. Are there any other gifts you'd like to talk about? A gift cancer's given you, something you may not have found in life if it wasn't for cancer?
Well, I definitely wouldn't have found worth. I feel more worthy within myself than I probably ever have in my life. And it's through that process, through the surrendering, through letting God mold and shape me, or like you said, being slowed down enough to, get to know myself, my kids, my husband, friends. It's like I'm starting to see the gift of worth. And I think as human beings, maybe none of us ever quite feel worthy, but it's amazing how much I did put my worth into things that I did, or I'm a crafter. I have all these crafts, and I'd be like, gosh, my husband's always supported that. And if I'm not using them, then what does that say? And then it's just a way, all these things that are so dumb, but he's like, just get them out and have fun, invite some friends over, make some stuff. And I'm like, yeah, why not? Like, why am I so trapped by the ideas in my head that it has to be me doing something or serving or whatever, instead of just being worth it just because of who I am, like you said. And I think I could probably trail 50 things off that word worth, from self-discovery to one of the phrases I would say is surrendering equals freedom. And on so many levels that are just, you could shout it from a mountaintop because it's so freeing. Like, oh my gosh, and with that comes trust. I am somebody that is a survivor of molestation as a child, and I can honestly say I've never had trust. Trust is the greatest challenge for me in my life. And God has through this cancer journey, whew, and everyone listening knows, trust. I mean, you got to trust your doctors. You're just consumed by it. Like, you literally have to trust. And I remember crying and weeping and being like, I don't trust. I don't want to trust, because those are my walls. That's my protection. Now I'm exposed. Now, if you see me, I mean, when I lost my hair, I never realized how much my long hair protected me in so many emotional ways. And now I'm vulnerable. And again, it's something I didn't choose. And oh, Lord, it was like, it was like trust was in the most capital letters. And God was like saying, I'm going to change this if you let me. And so with that worth word, it's so attached to trust, and surrendering is how I got there. And I'm getting emotional because that just all came out of nowhere, and I didn't connect the dots until just now. But yeah, trust is it's a scary thing, but it's also an amazing thing when we can truly allow ourselves to just, it's almost like trusting yourself, trusting who we are, and not who society wants us to be, or maybe our mother, or how we were raised, and being good enough for whatever. It's like, no, whose is that? Is that yours, or is that someone else's? To truly just sit and get to know yourself. I know this is silly, but I've always liked skulls. I'm the skull girl, and being raised strict religion, it was always like this evil thing, and you can't like skulls. And finally I came to a place in my life where I'm like, wait, God made the skull. I've had brain surgery. I'm so grateful for my skull. No, it's not evil. And I had to like finally be like, no, I love skulls, and that's okay. But I didn't realize how much of my childhood and what I was told shaped that. And it was just like, okay, gosh, I'm in my 50s, and I'm just learning this. But that's the power of it. If we can just, cancer's taught me to just start to allow God to teach me and to surrender. And I wish I could give that gift to every single human being. Just surrender. It's so freeing. But I also understand that, there was many times I wasn't in that place. And you know what I mean? You can't always do that unless you go through whatever you got to go through. So, when the timing is right, get mad, cry ugly. It's okay. It's okay. The relationship I have with God now is something I wasn't raised with. And I teach it to my kids. I say, God wants all of you. He wants all of you. He wants your anger, your happiness, your joy, your disappointment, just like me, your mom. If you're angry at me, I want you to come to me. If you want to yell at me, yell at me. I can take it. I love you no matter what. And that's God. And I've learned, because I was always afraid to get angry, right? Because I was raised, oh, if you're angry, that's bad. And now there's so much freedom in just allowing yourself to just surrender everything you feel. And then you can just find that worth, and that would probably be the greatest gift I've learned.
Well, that is quite a gift. Surrender equals freedom. And
Yes.
just this idea of trusting your self-worth, trusting the person that you are created to be, and letting that be enough. These are beautiful,
Yes.
beautiful gifts. Well, Louise, thank you so much for sharing your story with us and encouraging us today. If this conversation has been meaningful to you as you listen, please check out our other episodes of our podcast and dig a little deeper into checking out the resources available on our website. You can find more at adventuretherapyfoundation.org.